Well, it doesn't claim to be prophetic. It's not saying it's prophetic. It's just recording David's despair. It's not saying this is a prophecy of the Messiah to come and he will say this. It's just saying David said this. It's not prophetic.
Well,
it's just a psalm.
It could be prophetic. If there's a lot of things that the Psalms describe that then later happened in the New Testament, it becomes prophetic.
Unless the gospel writers copied those verses and put them in Jesus' mouth, unless retrospectively they added the verses to the story to make it look as if there's some correspondence, because they could have done that. It could be the other way around. They could have retrofitted it to make it look as if it was.
I know that argument.
They could have done that. That's possible, and indeed, many scholars think that's exactly what happened.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the Dead Sea Scrolls kind of confirmed that was the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. So, what do they confirm? Sorry.
That was written before the New Testament.
What was written before the New Testament?
I'm talking way beyond my own knowledge there, but
no,
I'm pretty sure that's what they were. That's what they confirmed.
Okay, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls basically took our dating of manuscripts back 1,000 years. So the oldest ones we had were about 10th, 11th century AD, and now we've got scrolls that go back to the time of Christ. Or just, I think the oldest one of the oldest ones is the Isaiah scroll, which is about 1 or 2 BC. Yeah, but Isaiah himself lived many centuries before that, and Moses lived 1,000 years. Abraham. I mean, we're talking the gap between the events they purport to describe in the Bible and the manuscripts are still huge, many centuries, 800-900 years gap between, say, the Pentateuch, the Torah, and the earliest manuscripts we have, and we have no way of knowing if the manuscripts have been preserved reliably, faithfully, intact.
Yeah,
they could have been changed. They could have been changed. We simply don't know. We can't say, and that's one of the reasons why the Quran sees itself as a way of discerning, discriminating between what is authentic and true in the existing scriptures of the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, and what has been falsified or changed or corrupted by them or forgotten. Because the Quran accused the Jews and Christians of changing and manipulating their scriptures, adding stuff, forgetting things, and so on. So the scriptures we have today are not the original Torah, for example, that Moses was given, I should say, on Mount Sinai. That's one of the problems.
See, that's why I don't fully agree with the argument of sola scriptura, which some Christians say. The Bible was created many years, hundreds of years after Jesus' death. But from the Orthodox perspective, that we have tradition that we kept. Saints.
Yes.
And we have the saints and the writings of them that has continued on the tradition from Jesus and the apostles.
Yes.
Because personally for me, just arguments on a text kind of misses the point of the salvation of our souls.
Right.
That if our heart isn't changed, if our heart isn't filled with God's love, then I don't think we know God at all. And I could know every kind of text there is. But if I don't know God in my heart, then how can I claim that I know the right life?
But we've already, I think I've presented reasons why I think the Christian identification of Jesus as God is mistaken, because Jesus wasn't all powerful, he didn't know everything, and he wasn't immortal. He died, he confessed his ignorance, and he was clearly very weak and not all powerful in many situations in his life.
He was the most bravest man that ever existed.
But he didn't face his death very bravely, according to the Gospel. So I know many men who have faced death.
How would you have faced that death if you knew?
Many men have faced Socrates, for example.
Facing certain death.
Socrates.
Yeah, he was a very brave man as well.
But he was much braver than the way Jesus.
And torture. All his friends abandoned him. Everyone abandoned him. The people hated him. He was innocent. He had only done good things. They cheered on to let a murderer, a criminal, lose instead of him. He knew everything was going to happen.
There are lots of great men in Islamic history and other religions who have faced terrible death without abandoning their faith in God.
I'm pretty sure you have good marches.
No. There are people in the Islamic tradition who are horribly tortured for their faith, who didn't abandon belief in God. Now, I don't believe, by the way, that what the Gospels say about Jesus is historically accurate in this regard. So I'm not criticizing Jesus. I'm saying that the way the Gospels portray Jesus presents him as a man who lost his faith in God. He said at one point, according to the Gospels, my God, why have you abandoned me? This is not the man of piety, of great faith in God. He lost his faith. He basically gave up. And he's not a role model, biblically, for anyone.
I wouldn't say he gave up, because he fulfilled what he was there to do.
But I'm just quoting the words that were given to Jesus in Mark. I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up.
You are interpreting them right.
Okay,
I'm not saying I.
How should I interpret them? How should I interpret them?
But I'm not sure you are interpreting them right.
Okay. But let's go back to an earlier.
You undermined the divinity of Christ by that, like the Jews who couldn't see who he was. That he did everything for love. It's all for love for those people that killed him.
Well, let's go before the cross. The day before, in Gethsemane, the story where Jesus got down and bowed down and begged God to take away this suffering that he was. It looked like he was going to have to go through. Although Muslims believe actually God answered his prayer and said, and rescued him and saved Jesus and took him to heaven. So Muslims believe God answered Jesus' prayer and rescued him. But in the Christian story, of course, he begged to have this cup of suffering taken away. God refused his prayer and basically said no. Jesus goes to the cross, dies horribly, and loses his faith. My God, why have you abandoned me? He doesn't know anymore what's happening to him, and he gives up faith.
No, he knew. He prayed just before all this was going to happen, and he even prayed to be saved from it. But he said,
"But he wasn't.
Your will be done, not mine."
Yes, not mine. But so his will was that it should. See, there was a disagreement
he
between.
was human as us. He had pain. He had anxiety. Suffering like that.
So Jesus' will was that he wouldn't go through with this, but God didn't answer that prayer in the way he wanted. But the Muslims say God did answer that prayer positively and rescued Jesus.
I can understand why the Muslims would see him as weak, because their prophet is a warlord and they believe in strength.
Warlord?
Okay. Muhammad was a warlord.
What do you mean a warlord?
Well, that's just what I know.
Give me an example of his being a warlord, Muhammad's being a warlord.
No, I haven't read the Quran. I don't know it, but that's why I haven't heard of it. And I'm pretty sure.
Oh, so you don't know?
I'm pretty sure you know what it is.
I honestly don't. I've read a little bit about his life and his teaching, Muhammad, peace upon him, and I've not come across him being a warlord ever.
Quite a lot of people, right? And took slaves.
Such as.
I don't have.
You don't know
the names or everything.
No, I don't
I'm not
know.
a theologian.
No, I'm not a theologian either. We're just talking about Muhammad's life here. You don't have to be a theologian.
But you tell me then how he was.
Well, Muhammad was many things. He excelled in many areas. He was obviously a prophet of God, but also he was a head of state. So he in Medina, he was invited to become the governor, the king, the ruler, the head of state in Medina. He certainly had an army. He was a father, he was a statesman, he was a lawgiver, and a judge, and so on and so on. He excelled in many, many roles in his life. The closest biblical parable would be someone like Moses. Moses also was a lawgiver, a prophet, a head of state, a father, a statesman, a judge, and so on. The parallels between the life of Moses and prophet are very similar.
He didn't start wars and go out conquering. He rescued his people from...
All of Muhammad's military battles were defensive in nature. He never initiated unprovoked aggression on anyone. So if you go through the battles, Battle of Badr was the first one. Well, why did that happen? Why was Muhammad involved in the Battle of Badr? Because the Meccans came after him. Why did the Meccans come after him? Because he was preaching exactly the same message that the biblical prophets were preaching. And what is that? There is one God. This is the scandal of Muhammad, is that he was preaching exactly what Jeremiah preached, Isaiah, Moses. All of the Jewish prophets preached the same message. The oneness of God, the unity of God, and also that you should be kind to orphans. And also his earlier surahs, which are towards the end of the Bible, the Quran in our English translations, they say things. What does God want you to do? He wants you to free slaves. He wants you to be just to people, to support the poor, the orphans, to give to the wayfarer, the needy, to the stranger. It goes on and on like this, incredible stuff, which you find in the Bible too.
As long as they have the same faith.
No, it doesn't say that. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that.
But
this was in Mecca, remember? This is in Mecca. He's preaching this to people. Release slaves. be kind, be just to the widow, and so on.
Say that they should conquer by sword and take over and behead the infidels.
There is no conquer by sword. No. No. You're pretty sure because you probably read it in the Daily Mail or the Sun newspaper or CNN or Fox News.
At some point.
About Indonesia and Malaysia.
No, okay.
Nobody go fight them and become Muslim. How about the Russian people? Some people. How about people in America?
I'm not saying that's the only way, but I'm saying you have that.
If you go through the battles, I mentioned Badr and there are other ones. They are defensive in nature, where he is being pursued by the pagans, mainly by the Meccans, and sometimes by their allies. The Battle of the Trench, probably the last big one that he was involved with. It was the Meccans with some of their allies who came up to Medina to try and destroy Islam, destroy Muhammad, destroy them. They lost, by the way, but not a single person was killed because, I mean, you know the story, I won't go into details. It turned out the Meccans withdrew and they went home. Now, this is the crucial test. So Muhammad is a warlord. He's a terrible man. Okay, so he went back and he conquered Mecca, which he did. He conquered Mecca. He went back and he took Mecca. He slaughtered his enemies, didn't he? He went in and he killed the Meccans. He took vengeance on his enemies in Mecca, didn't he? No, he didn't. He didn't. From the position of power and dominance, he behaved like Joseph. And he actually says this. He says this in the Quran. You know Joseph in the Bible? Joseph, of course, was the second to the king in Egypt. You know the story of Joseph in the Bible? Yeah. So his brothers, finally knowing who he is, having done the terrible thing, having abandoned him and sold him to slave traders and done for dead or whatever. What did Joseph do to his brothers? He killed them, of course, didn't he? Of course, he's a righteous man. He could have slaughtered his brothers because they did evil. No, he should. No, he didn't. Joseph didn't kill him. That's the point. That's the point. That's the point. So Joseph, when he was in a position of total power in the state of Egypt, he showed mercy and forgiveness to his brothers who had wronged him so terribly. And the Quran says, this is what, I'm paraphrasing, this is exactly the way Muhammad treated his enemies when he could have exterminated them in Mecca. He showed them forgiveness from a position of power. Now, this says a lot about the character of the man, the real character, I mean, not the character that some Western people have of Muhammad as a warlord. Because if he was a warlord, he would have destroyed his enemies. People who killed his family. Hamza, his uncle, was horribly mutilated. His liver was eaten by one. I mean, you know, the person who did that was not murdered. Was not executed. They were ultimately forgiven. Okay. So now, but there were examples where he did go to war and people were killed, but these were always defensive wars. He never initiated wars like George Bush did or Tony Blair, who, on a false pretext, invades Muslim countries, literally slaughters hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women and children on a lie. And these are devout Christians who have never been prosecuted for their crimes, ever. No worldly court has ever held them to account. Anyway, enough about that. So coming back to a man who did show mercy and forgiveness from a position of power, Muhammad, I think that is a great example for all of mankind of mercy. And indeed, the Quran says, you have been sent as a mercy to mankind. Interesting. The Quran actually says, you have been sent as a mercy to mankind. And if you look at this, brother was saying, what's the biggest Muslim country on earth today? I mean, what's the biggest Muslim country in the world today? Saudi Arabia?
Could be.
No. What is it?
China, India.
Indonesia. Muslim country. Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country, hundreds of millions of people. It was conquered by the Muslims, wasn't it? They went in there with the sword, took over the country. No? Oh, they didn't. Oh my goodness me. How can that be? How can that be? No, they were all peacefully converted, literally, by Muslim traders, businessmen, just people who did dawah, as it's called. They went into Indonesia, and now the whole of that country is virtually completely Muslim, through peaceful conversion, and it's the largest Muslim country in the world. Never an army's been there. Christian armies have been there. Lots of Christian armies have been there to conquer, but not a single Muslim army has ever been there to conquer. This is the reality. It's not necessarily what you've heard on CNN or Fox News or from the BBC or whatever.
I'm sorry, I'm talking to you.
Please.
I cannot add something. My English is not that good, but he's doing a very good job. I like it. But the tribe in Europe that time when Prophet Muhammad tried to, as he said, he's a warrior, he's a warrior, something like that. They came to him, the tribe, told him, we give you the money, you be our king. He refused it. That doesn't mean he went. How can we explain that when the tribes came to them and asked him to be their king and they give him the wealth and he rejected because he came as a messenger, not to become the world, to become a king.
Even when Paul was talking about when they entered back to Mecca with the army, they expected Muhammad to be walking like in an Arabic way. He was literally walking, his head was down.
Yes.
And like you can imagine with all the power, all this humbleness and all, he was looking down. Then as Paul said, they asked him, he said, what do you think I'm going to do for you? Then some of them thought that he's going to kill them. He said, I'm going to forgive you as my brother Yusuf did with his brother.
Joseph.
So it was the same Joseph.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah. So here we have a prophet, one prophet, an Arab prophet, consciously following the example of an Israelite, a Jewish prophet, Joseph, in the Bible, in his behavior. That's a man of God, isn't it? If you're copying the noble, godly example of Joseph, that's a man of God doing that, isn't it? Muhammad, a man of God. I mean, it just seems obvious to me. If we take away our prejudices for a second and just look at the actual evidence, a man who behaves like that when he could have slaughtered his